Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? I asked her for just one evening together. One small moment of closeness. And she looked at me like a stranger, then said, I don't owe you intimacy. 8 years of marriage. 8 years of giving everything I had gone. Just like that. I froze. My world tilted. The woman I loved suddenly a stranger. And in the silence that followed, I realized something terrifying. I had been living for someone who didn't see me. That night, I stopped trying. And everything changed. Do you want to know what happened next? Hey family, before we dive into this powerful story, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss the next one. Please like this video, drop a comment to share your thoughts or lessons you learned. Stories like this need to be shared to warn others about predators hiding in plain sight. Now, let's begin the story. It began on a night heavy with tension, the air in our small apartment thick like smoke from a fire long gone cold. We were arguing again, another battle over nothing, or maybe over everything that had been building silently over the years. I had asked her if she wanted to spend the evening together, a simple question meant to carve out a few hours for us, but her eyes, sharp as knives, cut me down before words could even leave her lips. I don't owe you intimacy, she said, arms crossed, eyes fixed on mine like a warrior daring me to respond. The floor beneath me felt like it vanished. 8 years of marriage, of late nights, of sacrifices, of bending and giving until I thought my bones would crack. And now, this. I couldn't speak, couldn't argue, couldn't even understand fully. My heart thumped in my ears, the apartment suddenly too small, the silence too loud. She walked out, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts, the sting of her words clinging to me like a shadow. That night, I didn't sleep. I spent the night replaying every moment of our marriage, every sleepless night, every weekend spent fixing, running errands, or sitting awake listening to her worries. Each memory now felt like a ledger, a record of unacknowledged labor and unreturned devotion. By dawn, anger had turned into resolve. If she didn't owe me intimacy, maybe I didn't owe her the endless sacrifices I had made. I began observing, really observing, how we moved through our days. The dismissals, the cold stares, the invisible me. Everything pointed to the same truth. Our love had become a one-way street. I began stepping back. Not abruptly, but carefully, almost surgically. I stopped asking about her day, stopped trying to coax conversation from her lips. The silence, at first, seemed unnoticed. She had grown so used to my presence that my absence almost blended in, like smoke slipping through cracks in the wall. She started leaving little gestures in my path, coffee on my desk, a suggestion to watch a movie. I let them sit. I didn't acknowledge them. Not because I wanted to punish her, but to see if she truly cared enough to meet me halfway. One night, I sat in my car outside our home, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The man looking back at me was tired, worn down by years of giving and being invisible. I didn't recognize him. Had I always been this way, or had this marriage slowly carved me into someone unrecognizable? That night, I realized something terrifying and liberating all at once. I wasn't angry at her. I was angry at myself for letting my life slip through my fingers. For the first time, I understood that stopping wasn't failure, it was survival. The next day, I tested the waters. I didn't respond to her rehearsed complaints. I let her words roll off me. The silence grew thick between us, almost unbearable, and yet, I felt stronger. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one trying to fix everything. And then, almost like a shadow flickering in the wind, I saw it. Her hesitation, the tiny cracks in her armor, the way she glanced at me when she thought I wasn't watching. Something had shifted. I wasn't sure if it was hope or fear, but I knew the balance had changed, and for once, I held the upper hand. Days passed, and our home felt different, strange, almost foreign. I no longer chased conversations, no longer filled the gaps with laughter or forced smiles. She noticed, of course. The subtle questions, everything okay? Or, you've been quiet lately, floated through the air like fragile paper boats on a river. I shrugged, said nothing, and let the silence do its work. It was a strange power, realizing I no longer needed to explain myself. For years, I had been the one bending, apologizing, filling in the cracks, but now I simply existed on my own terms. And as I watched her try, fail, and flounder for control, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. She began small, almost tentative. A cup of coffee left on the counter, a suggestion to watch a film together like we used to. But I let it hang in the air, unanswered, unacknowledged. Not out of cruelty, but to see if she meant anything she did. Each day, I became more aware of the imbalance, the constant effort I had put in, and the casual dismissal she had given in return. I remembered every sacrifice: the nights spent working overtime, the weekends spent fixing the house, the evenings I stayed awake just to listen. Every gesture, every action had been mine alone. And now, I let her gestures fall like leaves untouched on the ground, waiting to see if they would root themselves in sincerity. One night, I caught myself staring at my reflection in the dark window of our living room. Who was this man, so weary, so quiet, so unrecognizable? The man who had loved deeply, given endlessly, and yet was now invisible in his own home? Her words replayed in my mind: "I don't owe you intimacy." And for the first time, I asked the question I had avoided for years: do I owe her everything? If love had become a transaction, if partnership was optional, then what had all my giving truly meant? I began to notice the shift in her demeanor. Subtle, almost imperceptible. Hesitant touches, tentative glances, fleeting attempts to reconnect. But I held my ground. I would not step forward unless she met me halfway. I was done being the only one giving, the only one reaching, the only one fighting for something that should have been mutual. The house grew quiet in a different way now. No more arguments that spiraled into exhaustion. No more fights over trivialities. Instead, there was an unsettling calm, a silence filled with tension, like the moment just before a storm hits. Finally, one night, she asked directly, her voice small, almost afraid, "Are you mad at me?" I looked at her steadily. No anger in my eyes, only clarity. "I'm not angry. I'm just done. Done trying harder than you." The words hung between us, heavy and sharp. For the first time, she had no reply. For the first time, the balance had shifted. I wasn't the one apologizing, the one bending, the one giving endlessly. And in that moment, I felt the strange mixture of pain and power that comes from finally taking a stand, not for pride, but for self-respect. The morning after I told her I was done, the house felt unfamiliar. The air was heavier, quieter, carrying the weight of unspoken words. She moved around me like a shadow, cautious, tentative, as if afraid I would shatter if touched. I followed my routine, made coffee, checked emails, left for work. No glance, no conversation. Just the mechanical rhythm of a life once shared, now split down the middle. Every small sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of floorboards, seemed amplified in the empty spaces between us. I felt neither anger nor sadness, only a sharp, crystalline clarity. I wasn't the one responsible for patching what she had helped break. The separation was already beginning. In the days that followed, we barely spoke. Our glances in the kitchen or hallway were fleeting, cautious, like strangers avoiding collision on a crowded street. At night, I lay awake in the guest room, my new refuge, listening to the quiet, feeling the emptiness stretch between us. Loneliness crept in, not from missing her, but from missing the version of us that had existed once, before resentment built walls around our hearts. I reflected on my sacrifices, the long nights, the endless giving, the invisible labor, and realized I had been pouring from an empty cup. Every act of care had been mine alone, and now, the silence was teaching me what it meant to reclaim myself. On the third night, her voice came through the phone, trembling, small. "I don't know what to do," she said, and I could hear the tears in her breaths. I didn't answer immediately. Curiosity wrestled with caution. Finally, I whispered, "I don't either. But I know I can't keep living the way we were. Neither of us can." For the first time in months, we spoke not as opponents, not as enemies, but as two people facing the wreckage of something they had built and let crumble. There was no magic, no instant fix, only the faint flicker of understanding that something had to change, and quickly. Weeks passed, and our conversations grew more frequent, yet the distance remained. She suggested counseling, wanted me to come home, wanted us to try. A part of me longed to believe her, to fold myself back into the warmth of familiarity. But the memory of her words, the cold clarity that she didn't owe me intimacy, haunted me like a shadow. I realized that reclaiming myself meant setting boundaries. I wouldn't chase her affection. I wouldn't beg for scraps of attention. She needed to prove she could meet me halfway before I risked stepping back into a pattern of invisibility. The walls I built weren't meant to punish her. They were meant to protect me. Sitting alone in a small, dimly lit hotel room one evening, I stared at the ceiling and let my thoughts drift. I reflected on the years spent giving, the nights spent listening to her worries while mine went unheard. I thought of the sacrifices that had gone unnoticed, the dreams quietly shelved in the name of us. And I realized something profound. I didn't have to give endlessly. I didn't have to surrender my identity for a love that no longer matched my effort. I felt the strange, heady mix of relief and power that comes with reclaiming yourself. The road ahead was uncertain, the path unknown, but I was free. And for the first time in a long time, that freedom felt like life. It started subtly. She sent a message, short, hesitant, almost trembling. "Can we talk?" I read it, but didn't reply immediately. I wanted to see if her words carried the weight of sincerity or were just another attempt to smooth over cracks without fixing the foundation. When we finally spoke, her voice was quieter than I remembered, tinged with something new, vulnerability. "I don't know how we got here," she admitted, almost whispering. I didn't answer right away, letting the silence linger, letting her realize the absence of my presence was more than physical, it was a statement. Her efforts became more deliberate. She left notes around the house, small gestures she might have taken for granted before. A cup of coffee in the morning, a dish cleaned without a word, a gentle question about my day. But I held back. I was no longer the one to fill the gaps. For the first time, she faced a version of me that existed beyond her control, beyond her expectations. And I saw her struggle. Her words became careful, measured, no longer cutting or dismissive. She realized that the easy version of our marriage, the one that required nothing but presence, was gone. I spent hours alone, walking through empty streets, watching the world move while I stayed still. I reflected on who I had been, who I had become, and who I wanted to be. For years, I had poured into a love that gave nothing back. Now I existed for myself, and the clarity was intoxicating. Her absence taught me the value of my own presence. The space between us became a mirror, reflecting the truth I had long avoided. I didn't need to beg for care or affection. I deserved reciprocity. I deserved acknowledgement. I deserved to be seen. Eventually, she confronted me, her voice trembling with frustration and fear. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. "Why aren't you angry? Aren't you hurt?" I met her gaze calmly. "I'm not angry. I'm not hurt. I'm done. Done giving more than I receive. Done trying harder than you." Her face fell. She saw the consequences of her indifference, the result of years of unacknowledged effort and unseen sacrifice. I didn't raise my voice, didn't plead, didn't argue. I simply stated the truth, and the weight of it hung between us like a storm cloud ready to burst. Something changed that night. She stopped trying to manipulate, to provoke, to control. Instead, there was hesitation, uncertainty, and an unfamiliar humility. She realized that love, if it was to exist, had to be mutual. I no longer sought validation from her. My emotional independence was my shield, my strength. I had learned that giving endlessly without return was a quiet surrender, and I refused to surrender again. She had a choice: meet me halfway or watch the man she once knew stand firmly on his own. The balance had shifted. The storm had not yet passed, but I was no longer at the mercy of its winds. I was anchored in myself, And for the first time in years, I felt the power of choice. The days grew heavier as she attempted to close the gap between us. Her words were careful, her gestures deliberate, but I no longer rushed to fill the spaces she left empty. One evening, she cornered me in the living room, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Why are you acting like a stranger? What's happened to us?" I looked at her steadily, feeling no anger, only a quiet resolve. "Nothing has happened to us," I said. "The problem was always what us meant to you. I've given my all for years, and I can't give more where nothing is returned." Her shoulders slumped. The words I had held inside for months now spilled out between us, silent but unyielding. For the first time, she saw the weight of the emptiness she had caused, the consequences of her indifference. That night, the house felt like it was holding its breath. She tried to reach out, words spilling in rushed, fragmented sentences, apologies, explanations, confessions, but I remained still, unmoving. "I never said I didn't care about you," she cried. "I just needed space." I cut her off softly, but firmly. "Space is one thing. But when your words tell me I don't matter, and your actions show the same, I cannot pretend anymore. I am not invisible, and I will not be treated as such." The room fell silent, heavier than before. She sat on the couch, her head in her hands, finally confronting the depth of what had shifted between us. And in that silence, I felt the truth solidify. I had reached the edge of what I could give, and now, nothing could pull me back. One night, she tried again, this time more directly. "Do you even care about saving this marriage?" Her voice was strained, fragile, yet edged with defiance. I looked at her calmly. "I care about honesty, about respect, about mutual effort. I cannot save what has been built on imbalance and neglect. You have a choice: meet me halfway or watch me step away. I am no longer giving blindly." Her face fell, and in that instant, I saw the depth of her realization. The woman who had once seemed so certain now faced the reality that our love required more than words. It required reciprocity, consistency, and care. The days that followed were quiet. No grand gestures, no dramatic pleas. Just a recognition of truth. I knew now that our paths had diverged too far to return to what once was. The love that had sustained me, the energy I had poured into us, could not continue unbalanced. I made my decision with clarity, not anger. I filed for separation, not out of vengeance, but out of self-respect. She didn't fight it. The house that had once felt heavy with unspoken tension now felt empty, but in that emptiness, I found freedom. I had chosen myself for the first time in years, and that choice, as painful as it was, felt like life itself. The morning after the separation felt strange, almost surreal. I woke to silence, the familiar rhythm of her presence absent. No footsteps down the hallway, no murmured complaints about breakfast or the television. At first, it was unnerving, but as the day unfolded, I felt something I hadn't in years: space to breathe. I moved through the apartment with deliberate slowness, making my coffee, opening the windows to let the morning air sweep through. Each small action reminded me that this life was mine again, not dictated by expectation, not defined by someone else's indifference. The world felt larger, lighter, as if I had been holding my breath for a lifetime. I remembered the man I had been when we first married, full of dreams, hope, and love without hesitation. Somewhere along the way, I had lost him, buried under the weight of obligation and unreciprocated effort. Now, in solitude, I began to find him again. Small victories, a laugh without apology, a moment of silence without guilt, reminded me that my worth was not tied to her approval or affection. Meanwhile, she was learning too. Alone with her thoughts, she reflected on the words she had spoken so casually. "I don't owe you intimacy." For the first time, she felt the gravity of her indifference, the emptiness she had allowed to grow in our home. Messages left unanswered, gestures ignored. They were a mirror showing her the consequences of years of neglect. I could almost see the realization forming. Love required effort, consistency, and mutual respect. And though the truth was painful, it forced her to confront herself, the choices she had made, and the person she had become in the quiet spaces between us. Weeks passed. We lived parallel lives now, connected only by the remnants of a shared past. Yet, in that distance, I felt an unexpected peace. I had learned to honor my own needs, to protect my heart, to value my own presence. Each morning, each quiet evening, became a reminder that giving endlessly without return was not love, it was surrender. I discovered that strength does not lie in persistence alone, but in the courage to step away when balance cannot be found. I had reclaimed myself, piece by piece, moment by moment, and in that reclamation, I found freedom. The day I finally walked away from the apartment for good, the air felt clear, almost sacred. I didn't leave in anger, nor did I carry bitterness. I left carrying clarity, self-respect, and the knowledge that I had chosen myself when it mattered most. She watched silently, tears in her eyes, perhaps understanding now what it meant to truly give and receive in a relationship. And I felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders, replaced by something I had not felt in a long time: choice. Love is not obligation. Partnership is not one-sided. And the greatest lesson I had learned through heartache, anger, and reflection was this: I owe no one more than they are willing to give in return. As I walked into the sunlight, leaving behind the shadows of a life that had once consumed me, I smiled quietly to myself. For the first time in years, I was whole. The end. God bless you guys. Hey fams. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to come back to my page, FolktalesbyUS, because we have more exciting, emotional, and powerful African stories waiting for you. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment telling me what you feel or which part touched you the most. Every like, every comment, every subscription gives me the power and strength to bring you more stories from Africa, stories that make you laugh, cry, and reflect. So don't just watch, join the family, share your thoughts, and let's keep the magic of African storytelling alive together. Remember, new chapters, new stories, new lessons every week. Be part of it. Be part of FolktalesbyUS.